Father Elias sat quietly in the dimly lit hospital waiting room, the sterile smell of antiseptic hanging heavy in the air. Outside, the city's late afternoon light filtered softly through the large glass windows, casting long shadows on the floor. His fingers trembled slightly as he clutched the worn rosary beads, each bead a silent prayer whispered over the years, a prayer for his sister, for her safety, and for the hope that had never truly left him. It had been 28 years since Sister Teresa had vanished without a trace, an enigma wrapped in silence, a mystery that haunted the corners of his mind every waking moment. The official reports had long been closed, the police had exhausted every lead, and the church had offered what comfort it could, but nothing had ever brought her back, until now. The phone call from Dr. Chen had shattered the quiet of his world. A miracle, the doctor had said, a discovery in a remote village, far from civilization, a woman matching Teresa's description, alive but fragile. The news had ignited a storm of emotions within Elias: relief, disbelief, joy, and a deep, aching sorrow for the years lost. Now, sitting in the sterile hospital room, he fought to steady his breathing. His mind replayed memories of their childhood, the laughter, the shared secrets beneath the old oak tree in the churchyard, the solemn vows Teresa had taken to dedicate her life to faith and service. She had always been stronger, her faith unshakable even when he had doubted. That faith had been her anchor through the darkness, and now it was his lifeline. A nurse approached quietly, breaking his reverie. "Father Elias, the doctor will see you now," she said softly, leading him down a narrow corridor to a small office filled with medical charts and monitors. Dr. Chen greeted him with a tired but hopeful smile. "Your sister is stable, but it will be some time before she can speak or fully comprehend what has happened. She's weak from years without proper care, but her spirit is remarkably resilient." Elias nodded, absorbing every word. "Is she aware of where she is? Does she remember anything?" The doctor sighed, removing his glasses. "Her memory is fragmented. She has moments of clarity, but also confusion. It will take time and patience. But the fact that she is here, with us, is the first miracle." Leaving the office, Elias's steps were heavy, yet purposeful. The sterile halls felt colder now, but his resolve burned brighter than ever. He found himself drawn to the chapel, a small sanctuary within the hospital walls. Kneeling before the altar, he clasped his hands tightly, his whispered prayers a desperate plea for strength and guidance. "Thank you, Lord, for preserving her," he murmured, "for leading me back to her after all these years. Give me the wisdom to help her heal." Time slipped away unnoticed as he sat in silent communion, wrestling with a tempest of emotions. Grief for the stolen years, anger at the cruelty she had endured, and hope, a fragile yet fierce hope that their reunion would mend the wounds carved by time. When a nurse appeared, gently urging him to come, Elias rose and followed her to the intensive care unit. There, in a private room, lay Teresa, her face pale and thin, but unmistakably his sister. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing a flicker of recognition. "Elias," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "Tess," he replied, tears threatening to spill beneath his mask. "I've never stopped looking for you." A faint smile graced her cracked lips. "I knew you would come." The nurse motioned for Elias to prepare to leave, but Teresa's weak voice stopped him. "Is the church still strong?" His smile was steady, filled with quiet conviction. "The gates of hell have not prevailed." As Elias stepped back into the corridor, the weight of the past pressed down, but within him blossomed a new purpose: to help his sister reclaim her life and to uncover the truths hidden in the shadows of her disappearance. Father Elias remained standing by the door long after the nurse had gently closed it behind him. The sterile scent of the hospital, the quiet hum of machines, and the faint beeping from Teresa's monitor lingered in his mind like a reminder of how fragile life could be. The sister he once knew, the bright, unyielding spirit, was now a shadow of that person, yet her eyes still held that same unmistakable spark of faith. The memories flooded Elias's mind unbidden, transporting him back to their childhood in the small village parish where their family had lived. Teresa was always the fearless one. While Elias doubted and questioned, she accepted the world with open arms and unwavering trust in God's plan. He recalled the summer afternoon when they were 12, playing near the riverbank. Teresa had climbed the ancient oak tree and looked down at him, her face radiant in the sunlight. "Faith is like this tree," she had said, "roots deep in the earth, branches reaching for the heavens. No storm can break it if you nurture it well. Elias smiled faintly to himself, realizing how those words had defined her life, how those roots had kept her alive even in the darkest captivity. A sudden sharp pang in his chest brought him back to the hospital corridor. He wiped his eyes quickly, afraid someone might see the tears he did not dare to shed openly. Years of suppression, faith tested by silence, and now the overwhelming presence of hope made his heart heavy yet alive. The hospital chapel was nearby, and Elias found himself drawn there once more. The modest space offered a reprieve from the clinical coldness outside, a place where whispered prayers could fill the empty corners. He sank into a wooden pew and bowed his head, his rosary beads slipping through his fingers as he prayed. "Lord," he began softly, "grant me the strength to stand beside her, to bring her back from the darkness, and to understand your will, even when it feels unknowable." His mind drifted again to the questions he had asked himself countless times during Teresa's absence. Why had God allowed this evil to persist for so long? Why had a child of his light been snatched away and hidden in shadow for nearly 3 decades? The silence in response was deafening, but Elias knew from Scripture that faith often required trusting in the mystery. After what felt like hours, the chapel doors creaked open, and the nurse from before appeared, signaling Elias that it was time to return to the waiting room. He rose slowly, the weight of his prayers settling in his heart like a shield against despair. Back in the waiting area, Elias found Harold pacing anxiously. Harold had been a close friend of the family for years, a brother in faith and a constant source of support. "Any news?" Harold asked without looking up. Elias shook his head. "She is stable, weak but alive. The doctors say the spirit is stronger than the body." Harold nodded solemnly. "After all these years, it feels like a dream." Elias gave a small, tired smile. "A dream I refuse to wake from." The two men sat in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down like a tangible force. Outside, the evening deepened, and the hospital lights glowed softly against the encroaching darkness. Later that night, Elias found himself alone in his small apartment near the church. The quiet was both a comfort and a torment, memories and prayers intertwining as he sat by the window, looking out at the star-studded sky. The constellations seemed to whisper ancient stories of hope and resilience, reminders that even in the darkest nights, light endured. He reached for an old photograph resting on the wooden table, a picture of Teresa in her early 20s, radiant and full of life, standing in front of their childhood church. The edges were worn from years of handling, but her smile remained vivid. His fingers traced the image, and his mind replayed their last moments before her disappearance. It was a chilly autumn day. Teresa had been returning from a mission trip to a nearby town, eager to share her stories of faith and kindness. Elias remembered waving goodbye, the last words exchanged filled with hope. Suddenly the doorbell rang, jolting Elias from his reverie. Opening the door, he found Sister Agnes standing on the threshold, an expression of quiet concern on her face. "I came as soon as I heard," she said softly. "You must be exhausted." Elias invited her in. "I can barely sleep. So much has changed, and yet it feels like the same prayers I've said for years." Agnes nodded knowingly. "Faith is not always about answers, Elias. Sometimes it is about endurance, holding on when all else fails." They talked long into the night, sharing memories of Teresa, discussing the possible paths ahead. Agnes's presence was a balm to Elias's weary soul, a reminder that he was not alone in this journey. The following morning, Elias returned to the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that Teresa's road to recovery would be long and arduous, filled with challenges, both physical and spiritual. But he was determined to be her guide, her brother, and her anchor in the storm. As he entered the ICU, Teresa's eyes opened briefly, and she reached out weakly. Elias grasped her hand, the warmth of fragile thread connecting them across the years. "Rest now," he whispered. "I'm here." Outside the room, the hospital bustle continued. The hurried footsteps of nurses, the distant murmur of voices, and the ever-present beeping of machines. But for Elias, time had slowed to the heartbeat of a miracle unfolding. The sterile hum of the hospital corridor faded into the background as Father Elias stepped out from the ICU room. His heart was heavy yet buoyed by the fragile but undeniable presence of his sister Teresa. The reality of the moment still unsettled him. After nearly 3 decades, here she was, alive but changed by time and torment beyond measure. Outside the room, Harold approached, his usual stoic demeanor softened by relief. "She's awake?" he asked quietly, almost afraid the answer might be no. "Yes," Father Elias replied. "She's fragile, but she's here. It's a miracle." They both stood in silence for a moment, the weight of years pressing upon them. Harold, who had grown up with Teresa as a sister figure despite the years she was gone, seemed to carry a personal burden too. The shadows of those lost years lingered in his eyes. "I never gave up hope either," Harold said softly. "Your prayers must have been stronger than mine." Father Elias managed a faint smile. Faith does strange things to a man. He knew the road ahead would be long. Sister Teresa's body needed healing, but her spirit, though battered, seemed unbroken. Still, the trauma she had endured was unknown in its depth. She had spent nearly 30 years in darkness, separated from the world, trapped in a nightmare of captivity. The question remained, how had she survived so long, and what stories could she now tell? As Harold and Father Elias moved to a quiet waiting area, a nurse approached with a tablet in hand. "Father Elias, Sister Teresa is resting now. The doctors have requested limited visitors for the next few days while she stabilizes." "That's understandable." Elias nodded, his mind already racing with thoughts. "Will she need therapy? Counseling?" "Absolutely. After what she's been through, a multidisciplinary team will work on her recovery. Physical, psychological, spiritual." The nurse gave a small smile. "She's lucky to have family by her side." Elias nodded again. The church, his faith, and now family, all intertwined in this delicate moment of grace and pain. Back in the hospital chapel, Elias returned to kneel in quiet prayer. The weight of the past 30 years seemed to press down upon him like a storm, but he found comfort in the silent sanctuary. His mind drifted back to the memories of his sister before her disappearance. Her laughter, her unwavering belief in God, and the quiet strength she carried even as a child. He remembered the day she vanished like a ghost, swallowed by the unknown, a wound in his soul that never fully healed. Now confronted with the reality of her survival, he wrestled with complex emotions: relief, sorrow, anger, and profound gratitude. His prayer was not just for her healing, but for understanding, for a glimpse of why God had allowed such darkness to fall upon his family, and for strength to forgive the cruelty that had been inflicted. Days passed slowly. The hospital became both a refuge and a place of tension. Sister Teresa's condition fluctuated, moments of clarity followed by fatigue, flashes of recognition interspersed with confusion. During one afternoon visit, Elias sat quietly by her bedside. Her eyes fluttered open, gazing faintly at the ceiling. "Sister Teresa," he whispered gently, taking her frail hand in his. "It's me, Elias, your brother." She blinked slowly, her lips moving in a fragile smile. "Elias," tears welled up in his eyes. "I'm here. You're safe now." Her voice was barely audible. The darkness. It never left me, but neither did the light. I prayed every day for deliverance, for you. Elias nodded, overwhelmed by the strength she showed despite everything. "You are stronger than you know." As she regained strength, Elias arranged for specialists to meet with her. Psychologists, spiritual counselors, and doctors who could help unravel the tangled layers of trauma and resilience. One of the counselors, Dr. Amara, was particularly skilled in treating survivors of long-term captivity. She approached Teresa gently, mindful of the fragile balance between trust and fear. "Teresa, my name is Amara," she said softly. "We want to help you heal at your pace. You are not alone." Teresa's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of pain and cautious hope. "I want to be free," she said quietly. "Free from the past." Amara nodded. "That's the journey we'll walk together." Outside the hospital, news of the miraculous reunion began to spread quietly within the church community. Father Elias faced the challenge of balancing public curiosity with his sister's privacy and recovery. In the dim light of his study, he penned letters to church leaders, sharing the story with reverence and care, emphasizing faith's power to overcome even the darkest trials. But not all were ready to celebrate. Some voices whispered of scandal and questions about how Sister Teresa had disappeared and remained hidden for so long. The church's enemies saw opportunity to sow doubt and discord. Elias remained resolute. "The church has endured because faith endures," he told trusted colleagues. "We will not be shaken by whispers." Weeks turned into months. Sister Teresa's recovery was slow but steady. Her body grew stronger, and her mind began to reclaim memories long buried. One evening, as the hospital lights dimmed, Elias sat beside her. "Tell me about the years," he asked softly. "What kept you alive?" Teresa closed her eyes, her face etched with sorrow. Faith, yes, and hope, but also a promise. She spoke of her captor, a man tormented by his own demons, whose grip on her was cruel yet complicated by moments of vulnerability. She spoke of whispered prayers in the dark, and of a small Bible she had hidden all those years, a lifeline to God and to her brother's memory. "God's light was my anchor," she said. "Even when I thought all was lost, I believed you were searching, that he was guiding you to me." Elias's heart ached with the weight of her words. "I never stopped searching, never stopped praying." She smiled faintly. "Your faith reached me in ways words cannot explain." The reunion was not only a healing of the past, but a call to action. Elias felt a new purpose rising within him, to share Sister Teresa's story as a testament to endurance, hope, and divine grace. In church services, he spoke carefully but passionately. "We live in a world shadowed by darkness and suffering," he said, "but the light of faith shines brighter still." Teresa's story reminds us that no captivity, no despair can extinguish that light. Her presence became a symbol, not only of survival but of the unbreakable bond between faith and family. Yet healing was complicated by the return of memories that were both painful and puzzling. Teresa spoke of faces in the dark, names whispered by captors, and places she could not fully recall. Elias helped her piece together fragments, traveling to remote locations mentioned in her memories. They visited abandoned buildings, spoke with local authorities, and searched for clues that might lead to answers about her captivity and the fate of others who might have suffered similarly. The investigation uncovered disturbing truths, a network of hidden cruelty and silence, of lives shattered by secrets long buried. One afternoon, as Elias and Teresa returned from a site visit, she suddenly paused, clutching her chest. "I'm tired," she said, her voice weak. Elias steadied her. "Rest now. You are doing more than anyone could ask." Her faith, though tested, remained her guide. She whispered prayers in the night, seeking strength to face not only her past, but the uncertain future. As Teresa grew stronger, the bond between the siblings deepened. They shared long conversations, sometimes tears, sometimes laughter. Stories from before her disappearance mingled with plans for what lay ahead. Elias marveled at her resilience, how despite the years of darkness, she remained a beacon of hope and grace. The church community, inspired by their story, rallied around Sister Teresa. Support groups, prayer circles, and outreach programs blossomed in her name. Her journey became a message that faith, even in the face of unimaginable suffering, could transform despair into hope. The second part of their journey closed with a quiet moment in the chapel. Elias knelt once again, hands folded, eyes lifted. "Thank you, Lord Mom," he whispered, "for bringing her back, for the light that guides us still." Outside, Teresa's faint voice echoed softly, a prayer for strength and peace. The story was far from over, but for now the light was shining brightly. The months following Teresa's return were filled with a fragile sense of normalcy, a delicate dance between past trauma and present healing. The church community embraced her as a symbol of hope, yet the shadows of her captivity still lurked in quiet moments. Father Elias watched her closely, aware that while her body was regaining strength, her mind was still entangled in a maze of memories, some clear, some hazy, and others deeply painful. One evening, after a particularly restless night, Teresa called Elias to her room. The hospital wing was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. "Elias," she said, voice trembling, "I need to tell you about the man, the one who kept me." Elias sat beside her, hands clasped. "Whenever you're ready." Her eyes filled with tears, but she spoke with a courage that surprised even him. His name was Victor, a man broken by his own past yet cruel beyond reason. He took me to places I cannot name, places where light never reached. Elias felt a cold shiver. The name Victor was unfamiliar, but the pain it carried was clear. "I don't know why he spared me all these years," Teresa continued, "but I remember his face, his voice, and the whispers. Plans I couldn't understand at the time." "What kind of plans?" Elias pressed gently. Teresa shook her head, struggling to form the words. "Something dark, something bigger than just me." Elias's mind raced. Could there be others? Others still trapped? Or worse? The fragments of Teresa's story hinted at a sinister web beyond personal captivity. Determined to uncover the truth, Elias began gathering allies. He reached out to local law enforcement, human rights organizations, and even journalists willing to investigate quietly. The church's influence opened doors, but it also attracted resistance. Shadowy forces seemed eager to keep certain truths buried, and Elias felt the weight of unseen eyes watching. Still, he refused to back down. Teresa, though weakened, insisted on helping. Together, they pored over every memory, every detail she could recall, trying to connect dots in a puzzle that spanned decades. One breakthrough came when Teresa described a small town in the mountains, a place where Victor had taken her briefly. Elias arranged a trip accompanied by Detective Morgan, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for tenacity. The town was remote, almost forgotten by time. Its crumbling buildings and narrow streets whispered secrets of old. At the local police station, Elias and Morgan inquired discreetly about any unusual disappearances or reports over the past 30 years. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. "There have been rumors," one said quietly. "Stories of people vanishing, strange men moving through the hills. Nothing official." Morgan took notes. "Anything that might help us track down Victor or his associates?" The officer hesitated, then handed over a faded yellowed map with marks and annotations. "This was found near an old cabin. Locals say it belonged to a man matching Victor's description." The discovery gave new hope. Elias and Morgan set out to search the marked locations, navigating rough terrain and dense forests. At the edge of a forgotten clearing stood a dilapidated cabin, swallowed by vines and shadow. Inside, they found remnants: old papers, faded photographs, and chilling evidence of Victor's dark dealings. Among the papers was a journal, its pages brittle but legible. As Elias carefully flipped through, he read entries that spoke of captivity, control, and a twisted ideology that justified cruelty. The journal revealed Victor was part of a larger network involved in human trafficking and exploitation, using remote areas as hideouts. The implications were staggering. Teresa's survival was a narrow escape from a broader nightmare. Elias and Morgan sent their findings to federal authorities, hoping for a coordinated response. Meanwhile, Teresa faced new challenges. Flashbacks haunted her nights, triggering panic and despair. Elias stood by her, a pillar of strength, but also sought additional support through trauma specialists and spiritual counselors. One afternoon, Dr. Amara introduced a therapy method involving art and expression, encouraging Teresa to paint her memories. Reluctantly, Teresa began to draw. Images of shadows, distant mountains, a face half hidden in darkness. Through her art, emotions poured out in colors and shapes that words couldn't capture. The process was painful but cathartic, helping her reclaim pieces of herself lost to silence. Back in the church, Elias found himself torn between his duties as a priest and a brother. Balancing the investigation, Teresa's care, and his pastoral responsibilities strained him. In moments of quiet reflection, he prayed for guidance. One night, in the solitude of the chapel, a visitor appeared. Sister Agnes, a nun known for her wisdom and compassion. "I have heard of Teresa's return," she said softly, "and the trials ahead." Elias nodded. "It feels like a battle on many fronts." Sister Agnes smiled gently. "Faith is not the absence of struggle, but the courage to face it." Her words rekindled Elias's resolve. As the investigation progressed, news began to leak. The media picked up the story of Teresa's miraculous survival and the uncovering of a trafficking ring. Public outrage swelled, bringing pressure on authorities to act swiftly. Victor's network started to unravel, arrests were made, and victims were rescued. Yet the victory was bittersweet. The scars on Teresa and others would not vanish overnight. In the quiet moments between chaos, Elias and Teresa shared conversations filled with hope and sorrow. "Do you believe in forgiveness?" Teresa asked one evening. Elias considered. "I believe it is a path, not a destination." She nodded. "I want to forgive, not for him, but for myself." Their bond deepened through shared healing, a testament to resilience and faith. The story's final chapter in this part opened with a community gathering, a vigil held in the church courtyard. Candles flickered in the night as survivors, supporters, and church members came together. Teresa spoke, her voice steady despite the tremors beneath. "We are more than victims," she said. "We are survivors, and together we will build a future where light outshines darkness." Elias looked on, pride and love filling his heart. The journey was far from over, but the path was clearer. With faith as their guide, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. Father Elias stood silently by Sister Teresa's bedside, the steady beep of the machines mixing with the quiet hum of the ICU. Despite her fragile state, her eyes still held that fierce spark of faith and resilience. He gently squeezed her hand and whispered, "You're safe now, Tess. We will bring you back to the light." Tears welled up as memories flooded him. Years lost, prayers unanswered, yet hope never fading. Teresa's voice, though weak, carried strength beyond her condition. God's plan is mysterious, Elias, but his love never fails. Outside the room, Harold and the medical team prepared for the next steps of her recovery, hopeful yet cautious. Father Elias looked upward, finding peace in the uncertainty, accepting that some wounds take time to heal, not just the body, but the soul. He promised himself he would protect her, help her reclaim the life stolen from her, and share her story of unwavering faith to inspire others. The darkness that had bound her was finally broken, and together they would step into the dawn of a new beginning. Faith had endured, hope remained, and love above all would guide them forward.